Welcome to the Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture Series. At the end of each slide, there will be a 5-second delay. Use this time to complete your notes. When you are done, push play and move on to the next slide. This presentation will begin in 5 seconds. Welcome to Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture 1.7D on Consent of the Governed, and let's look at that old adage, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Or as Jake the dog likes to say, dude, sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. Don't believe me? Well, let's ask this person. That's J.K. Rowling. Her first book was rejected by 12 major publishing companies before it was published. Wonder what that book was. Or this guy. That's Henry Ford. And 5 of his businesses failed and he went broke. He lost all of his money before he started Ford Motor Company. Well, guess what? America failed the first time it tried to form a government. So we need to figure out, why did America fail? And what lessons did America learn from its failure that we still rely on today? With that said, go to the next slide. The United States Constitution represented our success at creating a limited form of government governed through a representative democracy. But before we succeeded, we failed, and we failed big time with the Articles of Confederation. A confederation is a weak or loose organization of states that agree to follow a powerful central government, with states choosing to follow or not follow the lead of the central government pursuant to a governing document. We have a confederation here today in North America. That would be Canada. The provinces of Canada are very strong, but they have all agreed to follow a central federal government. But before Canada tried and succeeded at creating a confederation, we tried as well with the Articles of Confederation, which were adopted in 1781 as the first governing document for the country. In fact, the Articles established the name of the country as the United States of America. Thank you, drafters of the Articles of Confederation in Yorktown, Pennsylvania, for doing... Wait a minute. Why is this scene not famous? Well, it might be in what the drafters actually tried to create when it came to our first form of government. The Articles established a first national government for the country, and some of it looks similar to today. It provided for mutual aid between states, privileges and immunities of citizens, full faith and credit for citizens, and extradition of criminal defendants between the states. In other words, you could go from one state to the other and still be treated as an American. But then it's a lot different. It created a congressional assembly with 1 vote per state, immunity for congressmen, a committee of Congress with limited powers to run the country when Congress was not in session, the power to represent the country internationally, ratifying treaties, setting imports and duties, and appointing ambassadors, promoting a national defense, and declaring war. All of that happened through Congress. It also created a national treasury without the power to collect taxes, but with the power to establish the type of alloy and value of coin struck. This is what our money will look like, but we can't collect any taxes to fund our country. We could create post offices, regulate interstate commerce, that's business between the states, and we could draft letters of credit. It could borrow money. Finally, it further allowed for Congress to settle conflicts between the states, as well as required the states to inviolably observe the Confederation. Everybody needed to get along. Wait a minute. Stuff seems to be missing. Go to the next slide. I already told you the Articles of Confederation are going to fail. The cool thing is understanding why the Articles failed, and that has to do with sticking with your principles or creating something that actually works. The Articles were our first attempt to implement the ideas set forth in the Declaration of Independence, things like protecting unalienable rights and creating a government for and by the people. We just beat these guys. We don't want to be like them. Well, we're about to learn that in order for things to work, our government's gonna have to look a little bit like the government of Great Britain. Unfortunately, the drafters of the Articles failed to consider the practical needs of a functioning national government. They put things that have to be in a national government into the state government. All powers not provided to the national government were reserved to the states, including the right to enter into interstate compacts with the consent of Congress, a maintaining of a well-regulated militia and state military defenses, standing armies run by the states, appointment of line officers under colonel in those standing armies run by the states, and state taxation, including voluntary taxation into the national treasury. So not only could the states decide how much money they were going to pay to the federal government, there was no way to settle quarrels between states except with armed conflict. Things like the war between Pennsylvania and Maryland that actually happened. Because of all of this, the Articles created a weak central government with no power to tax or enforce laws, no single person running the country, and no national court system. Unfortunately for the drafters of the Articles of Confederation, there is too much power to the people in this document. Go to the next slide. Our founding fathers realized that the Articles of Confederation were an utter failure. But we're the United States of America, and we're not giving up on our principles that easy. So we're going to try to draft another document to implement our consent, and we're going to call it the United States Constitution. The drafters of the United States Constitution finally implemented the consent of the people in two ways. The Constitution sets forth the limits of the federal government, and the Bill of Rights and certain amendments to the Constitution set forth the unalienable rights of the people. In other words, it balances our ideals with what we need to actually run a country. When it comes to implementing our consent in this country, the founding fathers nailed it. The question is, what did they do differently with the Constitution? The Constitution also fixed the issues found within the Articles of Confederation. It establishes the structure and limitations of a more powerful federal government. This is the big fix. No longer are the states in charge of what the federal government does. Now the federal government is in charge of itself, and it is very powerful when it comes to the things that we ask it to do in terms of governing this country. But we're really worried when we give that much power to the government. So the Constitution is going to do some other things to protect the people. It guarantees equality under the law with majority rule, while the rights of the minority are protected. It affirms individual worth and dignity of all people, and it protects the fundamental freedoms of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. This is a true embodiment of our consent to govern. We agree to be governed under the rules set forth in the Constitution. But that's not the end of the story. You see, the Constitution, it's been amended or changed 27 times since the founding of our nation. And the Supreme Court still is trying to figure it out. Every year, the Supreme Court hears cases where people say, well, what does this really mean in the Constitution? So, while we have implemented our consent in this country, we're still working on it. And that is really cool. That's it for this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in class.